So today, we are diving deep into the world of family court. This is a place where decisions are made every single day that will change a child's life forever. And we're going to tackle a really fundamental question of fairness. When you're in a fight for your kids, what happens when you can't afford a lawyer, but your ex can?
Just listen to this quote. This comes from a parent who is forced to go it alone in court. You can just feel the exhaustion in those words, right? The sense of being so completely overwhelmed by the process that just giving up feels like the only path forward. And the thing is, when you give up, it's not just your rights you're losing. It's your relationship with your child.
And this isn't some rare, isolated problem. Not at all. It's the norm. In some places, a staggering 80% of parents fighting for custody have to represent themselves. Think about that. The vast majority of people are walking into one of the most important fights of their lives totally unprepared. This isn't just a crack in the justice system. It's a giant, gaping hole.
This is what people in the legal world call the justice gap. It's basically the huge divide between the legal help people desperately need and what they can actually afford to get. And you know, you'd be hard-pressed to find a place where that gap has more devastating consequences than in family court, where the results literally shape a child's entire future.
So what does it actually feel like to be your own lawyer in a custody battle? Well, research gives us a pretty grim picture. First off, the stress and anxiety are just off the charts. You struggle to present your own evidence properly. You make simple procedural mistakes that can grind your case to a halt or worse, get it thrown out. All of this can lead to really negative outcomes. And here's the most important part. This isn't just about the parent. It directly impacts the well-being of their children.
Okay, so let's get into why this is so incredibly difficult. Family court isn't just a conversation with a judge. It's a maze. It's filled with confusing legal jargon, strict procedures, and complicated rules about evidence, all of which were created for lawyers by lawyers. If you don't have a guide, you're almost guaranteed to get lost.
And just how complex are we talking? Well, let's just do a quick lightning round of a few key terms that a parent is just expected to know the minute they walk in the door. Getting these wrong can put you at a huge disadvantage.
First, you've got legal custody. Now, this has nothing to do with where your child sleeps at night. It's all about who gets to make the big decisions. We're talking about their education, their healthcare, things like that. A lot of parents don't even realize the court sees this as a completely separate issue from daily care.
And then you have physical custody. This is what most of us think of when we hear the word custody, right? It's the parenting schedule, who has the kids and when. But if you walk in asking for one when you really mean the other, you immediately risk confusing the judge and weakening your whole case. And then there's the biggest one of all, best interest of the child. Sounds straightforward, but in court, it is not your personal opinion of what's best. It's a specific legal standard with a whole checklist of factors a judge has to weigh, like making sure the child has a relationship with both parents. If you argue your own common sense definition, you're not speaking the court's language.
And look, don't think for a second this is just about education level. This quote comes from a parent with a graduate degree who still found the process to be, in their words, very, very challenging. This isn't a test of intelligence. It's a test of whether you know the secret, confusing rules of a game you've never been taught how to play.
Okay, so now we get to the real heart of the injustice here. Because it turns out, whether or not you get a lawyer can depend entirely on which courthouse door you walk through. It's like a tale of two different court systems, even when the stakes, your kids, are exactly the same.
This really says it all. On one side, if the government, like Child Protective Services, tries to take away your kids, the system recognizes the stakes are so high that in most states you have a right to a lawyer if you can't afford one. But on the other side, in a private custody battle where your ex is trying to take your kids, you're completely on your own. It's the same fundamental fight, but with two totally different sets of rules.
And what makes this so baffling is that the Supreme Court has said time and time again that a parent's right to raise their child is a fundamental interest. That means it's one of the most important, most protected rights we have as human beings in this country.
So why the huge difference? Well, a lot of it traces back to a 1981 Supreme Court case called Lassiter. Instead of creating a simple, automatic right to a lawyer, the court basically said, it depends. They created this complicated, case-by-case evaluation. And that decision left the door wide open for this two-tiered system we see today.
So the problem is pretty clear. What about a solution? Well, for years now, advocates for legal aid have been championing a powerful idea. It's a concept they call civil Gideon. Now that name comes from a famous case, Gideon v. Wainwright, which is the reason that anyone facing jail time in a criminal case gets a lawyer. The idea behind civil Gideon is brilliantly simple. Why not apply that same logic to civil cases? If your basic human needs are on the line, shouldn't you have a right to a lawyer then too?
And listen, this isn't some radical fringe idea. Back in 2006, the American Bar Association, we're talking about the biggest organization of lawyers in the country, they officially got behind this. They passed a resolution saying, yes, governments should provide lawyers in civil cases when the stakes are at their highest.
So what counts as a basic human need according to them? Well, the list is pretty much what you'd expect. Having a roof over your head, food to eat, being safe, your health. And right there, on that same list, is child custody. They're saying the fight to keep your kids is just as fundamental as the fight to keep your home.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. Let's make the case for why providing lawyers in family court doesn't just help the parent who can't afford one. It actually makes the entire system fairer and more effective for everybody involved.
And you know what's funny? One of the strongest arguments comes from the Supreme Court itself. In that same Lassiter case, the justices admitted that when one side has a lawyer and the other doesn't, the fight can become unwholesomely unequal. Even they could see how lopsided and unfair it is. It's a total mismatch.
So what would actually happen if we provided lawyers? Well, first and most obviously, it levels that playing field. Second, it gives real protection to that fundamental right to be a parent. But here's what's really important. It helps the judge do their job better, because now they're getting all the facts they need to figure out what's truly best for the child. And believe it or not, it even makes the courts more efficient, because lawyers know the rules and they cut down on all the mistakes and delays.
And that really brings us full circle. The whole point of family court is supposed to be about the best interests of the child. But you can't get to a just outcome through an unjust process. A fair fight, where both parents have a real voice, isn't just about being fair to the adults. It is the single best way we have to make sure the final decision is the right one for the kids.
So we'll leave you with this question to think about. If we all agree that the right to raise your child is one of the most fundamental rights a person can have, then shouldn't the right to a fair fight to protect it be fundamental too? Really, it's a question about whether justice in this country should ever depend on how much money you have. Thanks for watching.